Okay, so my name's Lorne Underwood. My nickname's Woody. This is my home village here at Sayote First Nation. I was raised here by my mom's mom and dad, late Hazel Peters from Nanaimo and Fred Underwood Sr. from Sayote. And I'm here because I have 9 children. I deal with transboundary governance issues between BC and Washington State. Mainly focused on the salmon and the orca because of the Ocean Protection Plan. When that came in, looking at eelgrass and kelp restoration is a big part of it, but it's sort of a backdoor issue of quality of life for us as citizens, and that's exclusive, that's all Canadians, because I think these issues we're dealing with are a legacy for all citizens of Canada, but especially citizens of BC. So I see our work here with the herring is very much about the people as well. So I studied law and political science. So trying to find that happy medium between policy and legislation. We can shift policy, it's hard to shift legislation. So when we're dealing with the salmon, the orca, the herring, the Dungeness crab, even the plants, it's trying to find that way in, that sweet spot in policy to be able to make a change, make an impact without having to go to the longer term legislation process. I don't fully understand where it came from. It's like the term Salish Sea. Where did that come from? You know, and so I researched it. I was in a meeting like almost 30 years ago over at Pawquetchin, the village of Pawquetchin on the other side of the peninsula. At that time, Shell Oil was pushing forward a Salish Sea initiative, and they were giving money to the province. So whenever I hear a term come up like Salish Sea, I want to know, where did it originate? Did the tribes in Washington State support it? Were they consulted? Were they met with? Were we met with? So it's the same thing with this meeting. I'm not sure how it originated, but I see one of our guiding documents is out of Western Washington University at Tacoma. Western Washington University hasn't had a great reputation with tribes, so I find it interesting that they're the ones that are moving forward guiding documents. So I question it, and it's my job, that's what I'm doing. I'm here to witness, but I'm also here to question, and then to try and find a solution to the problems. And just attacking oil and gas, just attacking DFO, just attacking the government isn't good enough. That's easy to do. We can go up to the Pat Bay Highway and throw tomatoes at the cars going by, say we don't like the cars anymore. But I came here to collaborate more than anything, is how can we work together across cultures, ethnic backgrounds, across governments. I don't care what political stripe you are. What can we do to get the job done? So that's why I'm here, and I'm not sure if that'll happen out of this. I'm hoping it will, but I know that if you look around the room, there aren't many Red Indians here, so there's mainly Caucasian people. So we're very fortunate in that Europeans, the Settler Society, the Caucasian people want to come forward and work with us across cultures. That's awesome, because it wasn't that long ago it was illegal for us to hire lawyers to represent us, to defend ourselves. The fact that Nick Claxton, our chief, has a PhD now, it's unusual. It hasn't been that long. We weren't even allowed to go to public school. So now coming here in this venue, meeting with you folks, is a way of saying, not taking this lightly. We aren't, right? We understand we can't point fingers and blame anybody, that we need to step up, come up with some solutions, ask for help when we don't know what those solutions are, what they look like, and then move forward, sort of in lockstep, if you will. It's unfortunate because if you go back 20, 30 years, we've been at this place before. And our old people used to tell us to sit still, be quiet, and listen. And as a young person, you always want to get up and start running with stuff, or you want to take somebody to task over something. They would make you sit still. And again, I think it's what Europeans are calling mindfulness now, is what it really was. But you see things happening repetitive. So we've been here before. If you look at the Cone Commission report about the missing sockeye salmon out of the Fraser River, They were talking about the problems that the Salish Sea was facing back then. We never acted on that. I was really hoping that Prime Minister Trudeau was going to take the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the RCAP report, down off the shelf and try implementing some of it. There was, 7 books in that whole series. I used to read them. There's a lot of solutions in there that would benefit everybody, not just the Indians, but also the rest of Canadians could benefit from what was in there. Because I see it as a quality of life issue. We're talking about the herring, but the herring are saying, you guys are in trouble. The orca, when I'm in Washington State, I say, the orca are endangered? Yeah, but guess what? They're telling us we're in trouble. Same as the eelgrass is an indicator species. We have indicators that tell us we're in trouble, but we don't listen. So it's like the marine life is trying to get our attention and say, look over here, right? So I find that ability to sit still and see. And I just see a lot of regurgitation from the last 50 years. When you do your research, you see, well, it came up back here and it was there and it was there. And we don't get into the implementation of it. So a lot of people today, we're talking about United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Peoples. How do you implement that? Nobody can tell me. I'm a geek with it anyways. I know how to implement it, but it isn't the way most people see it, right? So I started at 66, I'm starting to lose hope, but I have a little bit of hope because of the attendance here today. Well, maybe we can pull this off. It's hard. You see, John Burroughs started the first Indigenous law program anywhere in the world last year out of the University of Victoria. He invited me in to work with some of the students. And so I looked at common law, which is noun-based, and for us it's English-based, for the most part in Canada, North America. How do you move common law out of that noun-based language of English through our Kwasanich teachings and Sinchothan language to create Indigenous law? What does that mean? So to talk about the herring without talking about the river, without talking about Campbell River, which is an important, Peace River, Columbia River, Fraser River, to talk about the herring in isolation is so Eurocentric that we as Indian people have gotten caught up in that. We've been a part of that problem of, and they teach us this in university, specialize. So the reductionist theory says, okay, look at the ocean and take it down to its smallest component and then specialize in it. Indian people, our people, the old people, traditionally were generalists. And you hear that in Dr. Leroy Littlebear out of the Blood Tribe, Southern Alberta, brilliant man. He's one of the few people that reminds the world that we were generalists. You need a house built, you come home, you want a house built, we all get together and say, oh, she needs a house built, we're gonna go do that because Sam's coming home. Oh, okay, so we just do it. They didn't do blueprints. They just went and bought the lumber, built the house. It's amazing. I witnessed it as a young person. They built boats, fishing boats. They went to Steveston on the Fraser River, watched the Japanese building fish boats. And then my grandfather and his brothers, they came home and they built fish boats. So that's what generalist is. Something needs to be done. So to focus on the herring without looking at stormwater management, without the hardening of the foreshores, there's so much that we need to consider that if I'm worried that if we focus or get fixated on the herring without looking at the whole ecosystem, if the ecosystem suffers. We might be able to bring some of the herring back. So we're talking about Georgia Strait today. Why is there no herring out there? They're transient, they're coming from somewhere else. They're not our resident species of herring. Why is that? Well, you look at Roberts Bank Terminal 2, container ship traffic, going to be 8 to 10 times more container ships coming through the very area we're talking about where the herring should be. Oil tankers from 5 a month to 1 a day. Cruise ships is increased, the traffic's increased a little bit, but the ships are getting bigger. So now we're adding that all in, and what kind of a chance does the herring have to reestablish in the Strait of Georgia? The provincial government put out a report almost 2 decades ago about the bioaccumulation of toxins in the Strait of Georgia. So what does that mean? The Fraser River, if you're in a plane and you look down and see what's flushing out of the Fraser River, it comes right into the Georgia Strait. So we can fight this fight about the Georgia Strait and reestablishing herring. How much success are we going to meet with? So from a social equity place, Sam, I would think we don't want to burn up all our social equity with people that we're helping understand the issue if there's not a good chance of a win. So I look at it and I think, okay, herring, what does it mean to me? It means the whales. It means the birds. It means we used to go collect seagull eggs on Mandart Island, which is a designated Indian reserve of sales. We don't do that anymore because the seagulls started eating garbage when the landfill opened up. So we stopped eating those seagull eggs, which was high in protein. So when we lost that, we don't even talk about that anymore. But when I'd go out there, I'd be out there because my grandfather would take me out in his boat and we'd be out there all day. So grills. Somebody mentioned grills today. It's the first time I heard anybody talk about that. We used to catch those. So the herring, the abundance of herring, the sea cucumber. So there wasn't just one species my grandfather would focus on. We'd spend the whole day from sunup to sundown looking at a multitude of issues. The kelp beds, your fishing line, if you're trolling, getting caught up in seaweed or kelp or something. Now there's nothing to get caught up in. So herring means a lot to me. I really like the pickled herring, the roll mops with the pickle in the middle, right? Oh, it's so yummy. And my body likes it. We're not matter, we're vibration, we're energy, and we're vibrating. The Lionsgate Bridge in Vancouver, people think it's steel and it's stationary, but it's constant movement, right? And it's when it stops being in that constant movement that decay and rot happens and the infrastructure becomes dangerous. So we're the same way as human beings, I think. So I think if anything, the herring means a lot because it might be that one indicator species that helps get everybody to come together, work together. But the next step is how do we get Ottawa's attention, right? That's the key here. Will a herring be a vehicle that we can use to get us to Ottawa to get legislation changed? DFO does what DFO does because they're mandated to do that by the politicians. The politicians might never have spent time on our ocean, right? In the Sailor Sea, so I don't think I answered that very well for you. Because and that's what generalists do. That's what our people, I think Indian people do. I say I'm an Indian because we're governed by the Indian Act still. So until we're not governed by the Indian Act, Indigenous peoples was never legislated. First Nations was never legislated. So I worry that we adopt these cute phrases that have no political power behind them. So I'll use the Indian Act until there isn't an Indian Act. So I'll say Indian people, our people on both sides of the 49th parallel. I'll be down in Washington State next week for meetings. Never before have we been at this place, I don't think. Puget Sound Partnership, Governor Jay Inslee, Premier John Horgan, like all of these entities, Friends of the San Juans, all working together. BC, we're about 30, maybe 40 years behind the curve. So we have a lot of catching up to do. So that's why it's hard to just talk about herring when there's all these other issues like shipping. Who owns the ocean floor? That went to Supreme Court decision, right? Who has the right to mine and exploit the ocean floor? The Supreme Court made a decision on both the Atlantic coast and the Pacific coast. So when we're talking about the herring, we're also talking about fiber optic cable. We're also talking about possible oil and gas drilling. Parks Canada's moving forward a feasibility study on a new marine conservation area reserve. They tried pushing this forward in 1999. They're back at it again now. I'm saying, what kind of protection would an NMCAR have for all of British Columbia? It's not just for Indian people, but for all of British Columbians. When you look at marine protected areas, MPAs that DFO does, you can go in as an oil company, you can go in and drill the ocean floor for oil and gas. Well, what's the sense of having a marine protected area if they're still going to be mining in oil and gas?
The one thing we want,
Yeah, so I worry about that here. What would an NMCAR do to protect our natural environment, the orca, the salmon, the herring, our own selves, right? Because the ocean's in trouble, and the increased salinity of the Sailor Sea, 30% of that increased salinity is because of the carbon storage the ocean is doing. CO2 is going into the ocean is absorbing it. That's why I want to do the kelp, because kelp sequesters carbon as does the ocean. So we could mitigate that if we just have government will and maybe some of the corporations back up, and we start doing kelp farming to sequester that carbon, take it out of the sea and help the sea breathe again. So that would be better for the herring, and especially if we do the eelgrass along with the kelp. You do that in tandem, then you got that what I call a nursery. The marine life needs it, the eelgrass and the kelps. It's the nursery. That's where the young are raised. They're where they have a place to hide from predators. So what happens for us now is, next phase for the herring is having to look at predator-prey relationship. And when you take apex predator out of the mix, what happens? Down the food chain. But pivotal species, what happens when pivotal species are disrupted? And that impacts on the herring. So it's so broad, and I looked at the agenda and I went, oh my God, there's a lot here. How do you break it down into components or segments that people can take away a piece of the puzzle, work on it for 3 months, and then come back together and put all the pieces together and see if you can actually implement that? So that's the herring. The herring's the thin edge of the wedge, right? Hopefully you'll open it up and the rest of the world will see it. And just one last thing is there's a lady over in UBC, I think it was, did research around bycatch, and it's now they're calling it junk fish. So all the forage fish that are bycatch in the nets and industrial fishing fleets, they're calling junk fish. So we have to be careful of the language that we allow to come into the realm of the work we're doing with the herring, and we need to determine the terms of reference so that we're clear about what it means to be forage fish and what it means to be junk fish.